Good morning, good morning. This is Jason Wells, and this is one more episode of Coffee Talk. This is episode 2. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I am very, very humbled and appreciative of everyone that tuned in last week. I've got an onslaught of comments and phone calls and text messages from everyone telling me how much that they appreciate me posting my video and how it helped them, or how they know someone that's going through the same thing, and people that forwarded it to other people that needed to hear my message. And I really, really am just extraordinarily humbled that you actually took the time to actually to log in and to see my video and to see what I have to say and to just listen to me. And I'm so happy that we can have this cup of coffee together every Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and we can start the day off on a positive note. Just so if you're going through something, you can come out better on the other side. So I'm extraordinarily humbled that you're tuning in now and that you tuned in last week, and all the comments and everything. I just don't know what to say. I just thank you very much. So I'm going to start this off with, a continuance of what we talked about last week. And it's about healing old wounds. See, the reason why I brought the situation up with my dad and everything that I went through was because, honestly, I believe that if you have wounds that are from your past or something that you're going through right now, you have got to heal those wounds. You have to address them. You just cannot just go through life and just think that they will be okay or that they will just go away, because they will not go away. Things don't just happen like that. And your brain actually has a way of protecting itself. So if you go through something traumatic, you might draw back from certain people that you care about. You might change your personality. You might become emotionally numb, because that does happen. That has happened to me before. That's happened to other people that I know. So your brain has a way of protecting itself. And there's always like a cognitive part of it, that there's like a cognitive disconnect where you could possibly forget the situation even happened, or forget parts of the situation, because your brain has a way of trying to protect itself. So you have to address the trauma that's in your life. And it's not just your brain, but your body also has a memory as well. So picture this. Some guy forces you in a corner and he rapes you, and you don't address that, and you don't go see therapy, and you don't try to get through that trauma so you can get through it and just live a happy life. And now years later, you're dating some other guy, and you two are happy, and you two get a little physical, and he backs you into a corner. That's a trigger. That could trigger you to flip out. That could trigger you to pull away. That could trigger you to be numb. And then the person that you're supposed to be with, the guy that is most important to you, has no idea what's going on, because you haven't dealt with the trauma that you've gone through. You haven't dealt with those old wounds that are still open. And if you have a wound in real life, if you have an actual wound and you don't address that wound, the wound's going to get infected. And you're going to infect everyone around you that you're closest to. You're going to affect the people that are near you, because you're around them the most. And you're going to end up hurting someone that you really don't want to hurt. So this episode is about trying to address old wounds. You have to address the trauma. You have to address the wound. And that's what I think actually happened to my dad. That is what happened to my dad. And I'm going to explain that. So I'm going to advance this to, I'm in 8th grade, and it's Black History Month. And I had a debilitating stuttering problem. Like I told you before, I couldn't really speak properly. My writing was horrific. So it's Black History Month, and we have an assignment. We have to write an essay, something that's related to Black History Month, and then we have to present it in front of the class. And that was the most horrific thing for me because I didn't want to talk in front of the class and I didn't want to write anything. I had a problem learning and focusing. So, but I had to do it. And I had a friend of mine named Torsten, heads off to Torsten, used to call me Stutterbox all the time while I am stuttering. I can laugh about it now. Thank you, Torsten. He knew that if he just said that one phrase, I was done. I wasn't going to mess with him anymore. But anyway, so so I went home and I had told my dad the story that I picked. And the story that I picked was this child that grew up in the segregated South, went to school at Scotts Branch High School in Clarity County, South Carolina. And he was class president, valedictorian, and known as the student activist. And he really didn't like the way the dichotomy between the way the white schools were and the way the minority schools were. There were definite differences. Like, you know, the non-minority schools had hot lunches and buses and gymnasiums. They had the best of the amenities, while the minority schools had nothing, had none of that. They had no hot lunches, no gymnasiums. Their schools were like shacks. And, you know, and to make matters worse, they had this one principal, and he was very, very racist. And he would do things like, hey kids, we're going to have hot lunch tomorrow. Let me have your money. And they would give their money, and then the following day, their hot lunch was water and ketchup. And he called it tomato soup. He would do things like that, and the students were just mad. So this one student would actually, he got upset. Like I said, valedictorian, class president, and he's also the student activist. So he formed this petition that turned into Brown versus the Board of Education and desegregated the schools all over the United States. This one student that I wrote my report on. So my dad found out about this, and all of a sudden he's extraordinarily interested. He's like, oh my God, you got to get this right. You got to practice. You got to make sure that you get an A. And I practiced and practiced. He made me, I must have practiced 100 times. I'm thinking, Dad, it's just a stupid report. Why are you so obsessed with it? You're more obsessed than I am. It's just Black History Month. It comes every year. So he still made me practice. And I got an A. And it's probably the only A that I got throughout my entire school experience. And I brought the paper back to him, and he was all happy. And he, you know, my dad used to always say, study hard, study hard, study hard. That was always the last thing he would say before I left the house. School, to him, was extraordinarily important. He used to stay up, like when I didn't understand something, and it happened quite often. He would go to work, maybe work 16 hours, come home and help me with my homework, and then wake up the next day and make sure that my homework was right. And I still struggled, but that's some of the things that he did. School was extraordinarily important to him. So fast forwarding, my mom is sick. I'm 30 years old. My mom passed away from colon cancer. And my mom actually divorced my dad like 2 weeks before she passed away. And, you know, I'll tell you the truth, my dad's health was declining as well. And I was still a little angry at how we grew up and some of the things that had happened, because my mom and dad's divorce wasn't all that pleasant. You know, my dad did some things that, you know, that I'm not really proud of during the divorce while my mom was sick. And to make matters worse, on top of that, he didn't show up to my mom's funeral. And they were married like 30 plus years. I was upset. I was angry. And I really didn't know why he would not show up to something like that. So the resentment that I had just multiplied during that time. So anyway, my dad was actually, his health was declining, and I was a nurse's aide at the time. So, you know, I had been a nurse's aide, but now I'm a therapist, but I was a nurse's aide for 25 years before I was a therapist. So it just seemed natural for me to move in and take care of him. So that's exactly what I did. I moved in, take care of him. I quit my job of 13 years with the county so I could move in. Now, I had my own bills. I had my own truck with a car payment, and he was on a limited budget. So we struggled extraordinarily through this process. There was one time my truck got repossessed, and I've never had a problem with my credit or paying my bills. So this was a whole new world for me. And then they would cut the utilities off every single month, and that drove me crazy. But I got really smart, and I probably shouldn't be saying this on film, but they would cut the gas and the electric off, and 5 minutes later, it'd be back on because I was cutting it back on. Until they got smart and they came and took the whole gas meter out, and then they came and turned the electric off at the pole. And me trying to be resilient, I'm in survival mode. I'm looking up, trying to figure out how they doing it at the pole, because I'm gonna climb the pole and turn the electric back on. I did a lot of stuff just trying to survive. But anyway, so 6 months before my dad passed away, this gentleman comes to the house and he said he wanted to interview my dad. So I didn't know why he wanted to interview my dad, because, I didn't know who he was, but he didn't seem very threatening to me. So I let him in. He comes in, interviews my dad, and leaves. He said that he'd send the literature to the house. So I'm thinking that, this guy's probably a student, somehow tracked my dad down, found out that he went to school in a segregated South, and he was just trying to get some information for a paper that he was doing. I thought he was a student. So then, within those last 6 months before my dad passed away, he completely changed. I never really realized at the time why he was so angry all the time. But as you get older and your health starts to decline, all that anger starts to go away. I saw this nice, extraordinarily apologetic, appreciative person that I had never seen. And I was thinking, man, why couldn't I see this guy when I was growing up? Who is this guy? Like, my dad he's a different person. He was incontinent and things like that, so I had to clean him up, and so we had a lot of talks, and he actually apologized for how he was when he was angry and we were growing up. It was very difficult. He apologized for not coming to my mom's funeral. And he basically said he knew he wasn't all that good to my mom sometimes throughout her life, and he just didn't want to face her family. He didn't want to face my mom's side of the family. And although they were very forgive and forget type family, because my grandfather, he was a pastor. My great-grandfather, he was a pastor. But he said that he didn't want to face them. He just didn't want to look at them knowing that, he could have been better to my mom. So I got a chance to see part of my dad that no one else probably have seen. So although it was very difficult taking care of him and, going through that and going through the financial struggles and everything, I would not trade that time in for anything. It gave me a chance to forgive my dad and to make my resentment go away before he died. And that's really important to me. You don't want to have resentment for someone when they pass away, because once they're gone, you can't really smooth that over, because they're not here anymore. So anyway, my dad passed away. He actually was in a rehab, and the day before he was supposed to come home, he died in his sleep. So that was very peaceful, because my dad was always afraid of death. So I definitely appreciate God doing that for him and for me. So anyway, that weekend I'm cleaning out my dad's stuff and I run across the documentation that the gentleman had that he sent to the house. And I open it up and I'm amazed because I look and it's not a paper from a student. It's a newspaper article from a reporter. It turns out the report that I did in 8th grade, it told me why my dad was so extraordinarily, that document showed me why my dad was so extraordinarily interested in me getting an A. Because it turns out that paper that I wrote in 8th grade, I was writing about my dad and didn't even know it. My dad was the one that did that. I'm reading through this paper and I'm like, my dad was the one, he was that student that was the student activist, the valedictorian, class president. He created that petition that turned into Brown versus the Board of Education that desegregated the schools all over the United States. That was him. I had no idea. He never talked about the story very much. I heard very, very vague parts of the story, but never the whole story. So I did some digging. I called the reporter. The reporter gave me some other resources. It turns out there was a traveling exhibit sponsored by Bank of America going all over the United States called Courage. Had my dad's photo in it. That these civil rights activists, Ossie Davis, wrote a book called The People of Clarendon County. My dad's photo's in it. I get kind of curious and I get on the internet and I search my dad's name. He's all over the internet. What happened was, the end of the story is that my dad's principal was so racist that he vowed to get my dad back for what he had done. He blamed my dad for creating this petition and desegregating the schools all over the United States. My dad had a place in history and I didn't even know it. So, how did he pay my dad back? Well, my dad kind of laughed it off when he found out that the principal was upset. Got out of high school, went into the army, served his country. Got out of the army and realized he wanted to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor now, he said. And he applied to all these colleges. And somehow, those colleges received all failing grades. Turns out this principal altered my dad's transcripts as retaliation to make him appear to be a failing student. So what happened is, this one act that my dad did, just trying to do the right thing, changed the course of his life. Wasn't allowed to go to college because as far as the colleges knew, he was a failing student. So he got a job at Campbell Soup, lived his life, did the best that he could, but was not living the life that he was meant to live. And I believe that my dad was wounded because of that. How could you not be wounded? How could you go from valedictorian, class president, student activist to failing student and not allowed to go to college and do the thing that God had planned for you to do? Like, that was something that he was supposed to do. He was supposed to be a physician, yet wasn't able to. They didn't fix his transcripts until 1991. He had already retired from Campbell Soup and was already, he wasn't going to go to be a doctor then. And now thinking back on all the times that he would get, he would get a little drunk and he would drink and come home and start with us. It was always after work. It was never, he would never just get juiced up at home and start with my mom. It was always after work. So I can't condone what he's done. I can't condone anything. I can't condone his behavior. But the last 6 months of my life gave me the ability to forgive him, which I cherish more than anything. And the new facts that I have about what caused him to be that way further lets me forgive him. Like I said, I can't condone his actions, but man, how would any of us react if we had that happen to us? How could you not be wounded for having one racist person, one person, change the course of your life? So what I'm saying is, like, you have to heal these wounds. Like my dad, back then they didn't have the resources that they have now. And, they didn't really have therapy like they have now. And, to be honest with you, typically black people don't go to therapy. I know they didn't back then. You should. But I just believe that you have to address the old wounds, because look what happened. My dad was wounded, and those wounds infected us and further infected him as his life went further. But I'm glad my dad had a chance to have peace. I'm glad that I had a chance to have peace with him, and I wouldn't trade that in for anything. So I just want to close this video by saying that you have to really think about how you want to live your life. You cannot allow certain situations in your life to alter the course of your life. My dad couldn't help it. This one man, he affected the course of his life, but you have the opportunity and the chance to actually address your wounds, have a good life, and to make your life better on the other side. Do not allow the wounds that you have to not allow you to have an abundant life. We all have the ability to recover and overcome. I'm a testimony of that. Because like I said in the first video, 45 years old, and the things that I've accomplished over the last 5 years is extraordinary. I'm an example of what God can do. And as Joel Osteen always says, I watch him a lot. Trust in God, and He'll bring you things. He'll bring you places that you never thought possible. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you learned something, and I hope you can apply it to your life, and I hope that I've done something or said something to make your day and your week better. This is Jason Wells. I didn't drink much coffee this time. I did a lot of talking, but this is Coffee Talk. Have a great day.